Hi, I'm Michelle Shingler, the editor-in-chief of Foreword Reviews. Thank you for tuning in to Petit Forward, our bite-sized interviews with indie authors. Today we're speaking with Jill Hunting, whose latest book, For Want of Wings, releases in February. It's the enrapturing story of her investigative journey to uncover the details behind her great-grandfather's discovery of the intact fossil of a toothed bird, a discovery that rocked the scientific community of the late 19th century, but whose details have been muted by time. Jill, thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Your book is a work of excavation. Your great-grandfather unearthed a dinosaur that some have called the missing link, and you seek to unearth his life story, whose particulars have themselves gone missing. Beyond your childhood love of dinosaurs, what made you so interested in this particular ancestor?
It all started with a photograph I saw, and the photograph was of 7 men dressed in Western garb, heavily armed, and one of them was my great grandfather. And in the magazine where I first saw this, he was misidentified. The names were in the wrong order, and he was described as the man with all the bullets, and he was thought to be a local guide who was with the 1872 Yale scientific expedition from New Haven. So I saw this man, I recognized him as my great grandfather, and one of my mother's cousins wrote to the magazine and said, "That's not a local guide. That's my grandfather as a young man. He was later Dr. Thomas H. Russell, a longtime professor of surgery at Yale Medical School." So all I had ever heard about this ancestor was that he was a surgeon and very reserved. I heard that several times. And so that did not square with this picture of this man in the Wild West in 1872. So I, I wanted to know who that was. And then I happened to be visiting a natural history museum in Bend, Oregon. When I walked in, there was this same photograph, and it, in fact, has turned up in a number of books because it's sort of iconic. I have it in my book, and so that intrigued me, and that was the starting place for me.
That's great. You have a keen sense of how unlikely it was that Hesperornis regalis, or Hesper, as you call her, a fragile creature, could even survive into modernity. It's something of a miracle that she was preserved. And then millions of years later, she was found, which is also unlikely. You write about your great-grandfather's discovery with due wonder because of this. Did you approach your own excavation with the same sense of how rare it is to unearth something that can be life-changing? And how did you reckon with the possibility that you might find very little?
Well, for starters, bird bones are extremely rare. Fossils are rare enough. Bird bones, because they're so lightweight, are even rarer, and they're subject to being damaged or crushed completely. And this was an 83 million year old fossil. So that's really old. And so not only was the fossil old, in fact, so old that they can't determine whether it was male or female, which is why I decided, well, let's just call her female and we'll just call her Hesper. But all the people on this expedition are long gone from 1872, and many of them did not marry or have children. And there was there were hardly any records, hardly anything written about this expedition. So how do you find information about something so old and so little is written about? So I began asking questions. How would you find out who those men in the picture were and why they were dressed like that? And because I live in Southern California, I'm not far from Hollywood, and I found out there was a famous costume company. It's called Western Costume, and they are the costumers for many, many Westerns. So I took this photo and just went to Western Costume one day and asked the receptionist, "Is there someone here who might be willing to talk with me about this photograph?" And this is an example of the kinds of questions I had. Who can answer a question about some aspect of this story? And so I met with a costumer there who told me all about the guns, the all the gear that these men were wearing in the photograph. And that was my approach, just ask a lot of questions. And what kept me going was that the more questions I asked, the more interesting material I found. And then when I finally went to Kansas and stood in that place and saw what my grandfather had seen, and it is virtually unchanged since 1872. No housing development, no gas station, no post office, nothing but these immense canyons in western Kansas that are very beautiful. So the doors just opened to me, and that's what kept me going, asking questions, meeting people, getting answers.
That's fantastic. Um, one of your takeaways from Kansas, which didn't proffer revelations from your family's past per se, was the quiet time you were able to spend with your daughter, a climate activist, while both of you were in the midst of life changes. What do you think you'll treasure most from that dig into the past?
In my mind's eye, I can see my daughter, May Boothie, at the top of a rock formation, looking in the distance. I can see it as if it was yesterday. And or in Kansas, we're watching the sunset, a beautiful sunset. We're talking about the organization that she helped found as a college student, and that now she was afraid she was going to permanently damage by breaking up a romantic relationship with one of the co-founders. And I, as a parent, like any parent, you would like to protect your children from hurt and hardship. And my daughter was going through this change. She felt very bad about possibly hurting this organization. And I would have liked to take the burden from her, but I couldn't do that. So all I could do was to be with her and listen to her and share from my own experience. And that's what I really treasure, is that time with my daughter.
And you write about that beautifully in the book. One of the points of poignancy and one of the tragedies of your book is the fact that we can't actually converse with our ancestors once they're gone. But if you could meet with Thomas Russell at any point in time to do anything together, how would you choose to encounter him now?
I would love to do that. I think I would invite him to meet me at the Peabody Museum at Yale and show me his avian dinosaur that he found. And I'd like him to tell me what that moment was like when he saw something that didn't just look like rock, it looked like something else. And I'd like to know, since he has been described as reserved, New England gentleman, I'd like to know how excited he must have felt. I'd like to hear about that day. And I'd like to know also if when he went back to New Haven, where he lived his entire life, went to school, was a hardworking doctor, I would like to know if that experience in the West colored the rest of his life, or whether he just put his head down and went to work, or whether he talked with his wife and his children about it. I'd love to have that conversation with him.
You write that your great-grandfather's own words have been lost to time. So in the place of his full story, you can now only gather a few facts, like his discovery of Hesper, and build narratives around them. Knowing that, what facts from your own story, which includes Vietnam War protesting and marching with Gloria Steinem, do you hope that your great-grands might build your story around?
I think less than the facts they may know about me someday. I would love to think they might have an impression of an ancestor who was curious and who liked to go places and talk to people and get to know them, and then sometimes write about them. I would like to be a different kind of person than my great grandfather, who I know so little about. I would like to be an ancestor that people could get to know. I'd like people to get to know me, and readers too.
As your book reveals, Thomas Russell is far from being alone as a distinguished member of your family. You've also written a book about your brother, whose story was almost lost to silence, and you share glimmers of other family firsts and minor acts of defiance throughout. Who did you write this revival of a disappearing family story for?
Your question makes me think of a little boy I met just a few days ago. I pulled into a parking place, and here was a little boy right next to me playing with a T-Rex. So I rolled down my window and said, "I like your dinosaur." And we got into a conversation, and he said, "Do you have a favorite dinosaur?" And I asked him, "Have you ever heard of Deinonychus or a velociraptor?" And he was saying no, but his mother is shaking her head yes. And I said, "Do you wear dinosaur pajamas?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Me too." And so, on the one end of this range of people who are interested in dinosaurs, because my book is a memoir with a dinosaur story in it, on the one end, we have children who know a lot about dinosaurs. And on the other end, we have professional paleontologists. And my book is for all the rest of us in between who never lose our fascination with them.
And it's such a treat. We're so glad that we got a chance to read it and to talk with you today about it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank
The
you.
book comes out still on the 24th, right? February 24th?
Yes, that's right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.